Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. Alright, we are back on the campus of Baylor University today. You may recall that we were here a couple months ago, back in February, to look at the two Baylor mascots, the Baylor Bears, Lady and Joy. And as we did that, we also kind of wandered around campus a little bit, and I kind of stumbled upon something that I was unaware of, about kind of a tragedy that happened here almost 100 years ago. And I didn't know anything about it. Like I said, I just found a memorial on the campus, and I decided I wanted to come back today because now I've learned a little bit more about this story, and I want to tell you the tragic story of the Immortal 10. So as I was wandering around campus here on my way to the memorial, I noticed that the communications center here is named after one of the victims, Jack Castlelock. So yeah, it's had a huge impact on this whole campus and actually this whole town. All right, so you remember this from last time we were here. Fortunately today the campus is virtually abandoned, so that's kind of a good thing here. This is the statue that was put here in memorial to the victims. Basically, what happened here is on January 22nd, 1927, the basketball team of Baylor was on its way to Austin, Texas to play the Texas Longhorns. And it had been a rainy day, and a trip that normally takes like 2 hours to get there, they had actually been on the road for 3.5 hours because the traffic conditions were so bad. And as they were passing through a town called Round Rock, which is just a little north of Austin, they were diverted off a main road and were crossing a railroad track. And at this point there were no overpasses for the railroad cars or for vehicles. There were no lights, there were no crossing gates. It was just the train track and nothing else. And as the bus began to cross the railroad tracks, a train was coming, and the driver saw the train at the last minute and tried to get out of the way, but the slick roads just wouldn't allow him to get out in time. And it turns out that the train was already running a little late, so the driver was pushing the speed a little bit to try and catch up. And what ended up happening is, as the bus driver tried to get off the track, the distance got closed too quickly, and the train ended up hitting the back end, the back right side of the bus. It killed 6 of the players instantly, and the other 4 survived for a short time, but died within 24 hours. Turns out it turns out that the train stopped after the impact and backed up, and they tried to give assistance to the first responders who had already started helping. And what they actually ended up doing is, since the train itself was headed to Taylor, Texas, which is just a few miles away, they actually picked up a couple of the victims and transported them to Taylor. Unfortunately, those 2 victims passed away later on in the day. Additionally, 2 other of the victims were taken to Georgetown, which is a little north of Round Rock, where this all happened, and unfortunately they passed away en route. Now, there is one story of one hero on this bus, and it's this gentleman right here, Clyde Kelly. Clyde was on the bus with his roommate, and he saw the train coming and managed to push his roommate, a guy named Weir Washman, out of the bus before the train got hit by the bus. He saved his best friend and roommate's life at the cost of his own life. And it's interesting, they actually have each of the victims is represented here, and they have a little nameplate to identify each of them. So this is Clyde Kelly here, and this is Robert Hannon on the left, and James Walker on the right. And then we'll come over here. This is Ivy Foster Jr. There was actually a kind of an ironic tragedy in this. It turns out when the accident happened in Round Rock, that a man who heard the incident came out and started to help look for victims, and it turned out that he found his own son among the dead. This man here, this was Ivy Foster Jr. His father, Ivy Foster Sr., discovered his body at the incident, at the crash. And then we have here Robert Haley, Sam Dillow, Jack Castlellaw. That's the guy that was that the communications building that we identified a couple minutes ago. This is the guy it was named after. William Winchester, Willis Murray, and Merle Dudley. He was one of the cheerleaders for the Baylor team. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, when I stumbled upon this 3 months ago, I didn't even know what it was all about. And actually wandered around the campus and ended up winding up behind this monument where there's actually a little plaque that tells the whole story. But and it was funny because I was wandering around. I'd actually gone elsewhere on the campus and then was walking by this and found this plaque here which told the story. On January 22nd, 1927, the Baylor basketball team left Waco for a game in Austin against Texas. In Round Rock, with the bus only seconds away from reaching a railroad crossing, the team's coach suddenly saw a train rapidly approaching from the west, where the view had been blocked by passenger cars on a siding. Despite the driver's efforts to avoid a collision, the engine struck the back half of the bus. 10 of the 22 passengers died that day as a result of the incident. The memorial service for the Immortal 10 was held 2 days after the tragedy. Thus began a tradition of remembrance that continues today. After decades of observance, the story of the Immortal 10 binds generations of the Baylor family, affirming the abiding value of faith, community, and hope. Baylor University is grateful for the scores of alumni and friends whose support provided this tribute to the Immortal 10 to ensure their memory will not perish. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that led to this tragedy, in addition to the poor weather conditions at the time, was the fact that there was no overpass for vehicles to pass over the railroad tracks. There were no lights, no crossing gates, no nothing. And as a result of this tragedy, a lot of reforms were made. Shortly afterwards, a few years after this incident, the first overpass of a railroad line was created in Round Rock as a result of this. In fact, that bridge has been named for the Immortal 10 and commemorates this tragedy. Additionally, shortly after this, almost throughout the nation, all school buses began stopping at railroad tracks to make sure it was safe to clear before proceeding, even if there are gates or anything else. You know, you see that now today. Even buses to this day will stop at railroad tracks, especially school buses. And that was largely triggered by this incident. So like I said, I kind of knew I had to come back and visit this place when I heard the whole story again and do a whole vlog just on this story, because this was such a tragedy. But it did lead to a lot of reform that we still follow today to keep buses and trains separated like this. So if there is, you know, you got to find that silver lining, because is usually a silver lining in a tragedy like this. So I think that's all that I have for today. Thank you as always for watching, and rest in peace, Immortal 10.